Alright, today with the 53 gold top, we're going to get the neck back on, put the fretboard back on, and fret this sucker and get it ready to start finishing it. Get really close, guys. Let's get you into the video here. So we need to make sure that I've got a good neck joint here. So we're going to just sand off some of the old hide glue, make sure that it fits properly. There's some hide glue in the crevices there. So we're going to test fit this once, make sure it's fit. Backside needs a little bit of sanding as well, a little bit of hide glue there. We're going to be using hot hide glue again. We're going to weigh this out, equal parts water and equal parts hide glue. I think this is Belgian hide glue. So equal weight of water and glue. We'll let this sit overnight. And then we'll go ahead and use my heat gun and heat this up. And one of the best ways to use hide glue so it has a little bit more open time and it doesn't dry and gel too quickly is to heat up the work surface that you're using this on. So I've got my heat gun from Amazon, and we'll just heat the joint, heat the tenon, clamp it, make sure it test fits, and then we'll move my hide glue over. Again, keep the joint warm. And I've got a sort of cheap paintbrush. And we're going to keep the joint warm, get the paintbrush, and apply the glue to the joint and the tenon. Here we'll start with the tenon. Apply it on. And then we'll make sure that we've got some glue on the joint itself. This is just a cheap brush as well. We'll just chuck it after this. So I've got enough glue everywhere. Glue it down. I've got my clamp right on the top of me. And we'll go ahead and clamp this. The interesting thing as I was doing this is that it slid every time I clamped it like this. You could see it just slide. The pressure, downward pressure is pushing the neck back out, which I haven't had that happen before. I thought that was odd. So we're making sure that I'm holding it, making sure it's not sliding. And what we're going to do is we're going to flip that clamp around, and for some reason that pressure is pushing the neck out, which is not what I wanted. So I'll flip this around and clamp this way, and then this worked. Not really sure why it was doing that. You don't need a whole lot of clamping pressure with hide glue. And then we'll just let this sit. So it's nice and flush. It's not moving. And then to make sure that this stays in place, I'm going to get a couple rods where I drilled out, and I'm going to plug those holes with the rods. Some wooden dowels, just going to help make sure that this doesn't move. So here is the wooden dowel. I used a 1/8 bit to drill to use the steam to get the neck out, and then we're just going to apply some extra wooden dowels in here so it doesn't move, and it's exactly where it should be. So we'll put 3 in, not really jamming them in there, but just 3 in, and then we'll come back and cut them. I just wanted to make sure that the neck wasn't going to slide on me at all. So we get a towel and some water and just wipe off whatever's floating around now that it's sitting in its spot. So you see the initial 2 that I put on to hold it, and then I added a couple more. So once it's been dried for 24 hours, I'll come back and just cut these off. And then I have a little bit of sanding to do to get the neck and the top of the body level to glue the fretboard on. Now a lot of times Gibson actually glues the neck on and the fretboard at the same time, so the fretboard and the neck are one piece when they put it onto the body. I didn't do it this way because I wanted to make sure that I got it perfectly level. And so here I've got my sanding block, and I'm just making sure that I've got the neck tenon and the wood flush so that I get the fretboard to sit perfectly on this piece of wood. That's also why I didn't fret this beforehand. I knew I would have just a little bit of play, and I wanted to make sure that as I do the fretting, I get it set up perfectly. So then if you guys remember, I don't know, I guess it was the first or second video, one of the inlays fell out, and I drilled to make sure that I've got the exact spot where this was set up before. So I've got 2 pins in the fretboard that are going to hold the fretboard down as I'm applying the hide glue, and it doesn't move. So I've got a little bit of excess waste on the binding that I have to sand down. Remember, I didn't sand it too much, wanted to leave just a little bit. Again, I used the heat gun to heat up the back of the fretboard and the neck itself. Came back with some hide glue again, applied it on just slightly thicker onto the neck. Didn't apply it on the fretboard as well. I didn't want it to slide at all, so I'm making sure I get a nice even coat on the neck itself. The pins are in, and then we'll go ahead and start clamping this up. So I've got a clamp brace on the bottom, and I have just enough wiggle room to move the fretboard and pinch it so that it's flat at the nut. And then we'll go ahead and just start clamping this down across the body. So I've got a 12-inch radius block that is giving even clamping pressure, and then I'm coming back with my heavy-duty StewMac sanding beam, again clamping this fretboard down evenly across the whole body. And again, you can never have too many clamps, and I wanted to make sure that this is flush, and then I'll add 2 clamps there at the heel and make sure that I've got the even pressure pulling this down. We let that sit then for about 4 or 5 days, maybe a little bit longer. I'll come back with a scraper and then just scrape so that the binding is flush to the side of the neck. I know everyone hates when I say StewMac now, but I'm using those thicker scrapers from StewMac. I really like them. I think that's one of their better tools. And then I've got 80 grit Stickum sandpaper on my block here, and we're just getting it all flush. So on this side, it was sticking out maybe like a hair more than on the other side, so we sand a little bit more of this down. And I place those side dots in just at the perfect depth so that I don't lose any of them. That is a common problem sometimes for the new guys, is that you don't drill them far enough, and then as you're either sanding your inlays or sanding the side dots, you sand them out. I've done that before. And then we'll do this on the top here as well, get it nice and flat. Got a little bit of a edge there, just a little bit sticking out. Sand that down, and then make sure that section right there is flat. I've got a little scraper. There was some hide glue popping off, and then just a little scraper to scrape that out. So now it's time to glue in that inlay that had popped out. We've got some tape, and we're going to seal off the fretboard so we don't get any damage. Make sure that I've got any gunk out of the channel. Got some low stick tape there. Make sure the inlay fits. Add 2 more pieces of tape. We'll get some Glue Boost super glue. Pour a little bit in. Get a toothpick to sort of move it around. Make sure it doesn't spill out everywhere, but that it's evenly covering the fret marker. It's looking pretty good. Hold it down there for a second. And then what we're going to do is add a piece of tape over it. And then we're going to add that radius block on top of it as well. And then just hold it down. Let this sit for a couple hours, make sure it dries. And then we'll start sanding the fretboard flat. Start with 80 grit and move up our way to 320 grit. And now I know for sure I've got a dead flat fretboard. This is the 320. And then I pull out, there were some grinding marks on the fretboard that I pulled out when I sanded this out. And once we sand, we need to clean out the frets so that there's no buildup in there and I can't get the frets to properly sit. So I've got this fret cleaning out tool. It's going to clean out any of the glue from the binding that sort of seeped in, or any of the rosewood from sanding. And we'll just clean out the frets, make sure they're clean. And then there was a little bit grinding on the side, and I'll just take the binding down slightly. So then we're going to get the frets ready, and you can see I've been doing a couple already. We're going to use the fret nippers from Stu Mac. I have tried the generic ones that do not work as well. So everyone complains when I say the Stu Mac tools. This one is significantly better than the replacement generic tool. We're going to clip off the tang so that the fret wire hangs over the binding and that it lines up with the edge of the fretboard. But you've got to snip off that tang, and then I file a little bit of that down, and then we just size the fret up before we push them down. So the Stu Mac tool is significantly better than any of the other tools, especially for this. So we're going to use some Titebond wood glue. These are just medium frets, and we're just going to go ahead and pop these down, and that's it. A little bit of glue, pop it down. I do about 7 frets at a time. And we push it down, make sure it fits. You don't want to press too much or else you're going to indent the fretboard. Get my towel, clean off any of the glue, and then go to the next one. You just want a little bit of glue on each side so that it holds the fret down. Again, wiggle it up, push it in, you just lightly so it sits. Wipe off the glue, and like I said, I do about 7 of these at a time, and then I'll get my radius block and then clamp them down so it's perfect. Here this one needed to move over just slightly, so I tap it with my ball peen hammer or whatever, and just keep going down the line. So then after I do those first 6 or 7, I'll come back, glue these down, and just let this sit for about 6 hours. Make sure none of them come back up. It's the land of the rising fret sometimes. We'll then get some end nippers and clean up the sides. These I made myself. I got a pair of clippers and then just grinded them down. Everything's looking good. Careful that you don't lift any of the frets up when you do that. And then we're not going to do the top level, but we're going to level the sides and then do that 35-degree bevel. This is one of the tools that I made many years ago. And we'll just level the sides and then put the edge on the frets. And then once this is all finished and we get this under string pressure for a little bit, we'll then go ahead and do the final fret level. That's my sort of special way of making sure the guitar is set up perfectly as we do all the preliminary work, get them level, get them beveled. Even got a sanding beam here to make sure that they're all flat. And then once I have the guitar under string pressure, I can re-level because you never know what's going to move. Just my personal preference of how I do the fretting. So then here's that 35-degree bevel. There's an old video of me making these. I think I sold one or gave one away at some point. But what's nice is I didn't sand any of the inlays out as I was re-rating the board. And then here I'm not taking too much off the sides. And that's it, guys. We're ready to put some filler on and start finishing here. So thanks for watching, guys. The finishing videos will take a little bit longer, but we're getting really close. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.